What happens when one of Britain's most beloved comedic actors walks onto a morning talk show expecting a friendly chat, only to be ambushed by a host whose ego has grown too large for the studio? In just 34 seconds of on-air tension, Lorraine Kelly's smug smile would vanish completely as Rowan Atkinson delivered the most devastating exit in talk show history. The morning started like any other broadcast. Lorraine sat behind her desk, flanked by her regular panelists, now fashion correspondent Mark Hayes and showbiz reporter Ross King. The studio audience buzzed with excitement. Rowan Atkinson was scheduled to discuss his latest project, a return to physical comedy that had fans around the world eagerly waiting. As Rowan walked onto the set, the audience erupted in applause. He waved politely, that familiar reserved smile on his face, and took his seat across from Lorraine. The cameras rolled, the red lights blinked on, and what should have been a delightful interview quickly turned into something far more sinister. "Well, well, well," Lorraine began, leaning back in her chair with an air of superiority. "Look who finally decided to grace us with his presence. Rowan Atkinson, everyone." The audience clapped, but Rowan's expression shifted slightly. There was something off about her tone, something dismissive. Mark Hayes noticed it too, glancing down at his notes with a frown. Ross King cleared his throat uncomfortably, already sensing the strange energy filling the studio. "Thank you for having me," Rowan said politely, adjusting his position in the chair. "It's nice to be here." "Is it though?" Lorraine asked, tilting her head with a smirk. "Is it really nice? Or is this just another stop on your publicity tour? Another box to tick off before you move on to the next interview?" Rowan paused, clearly surprised by the hostility. "I'm sorry, I don't understand what you mean." "I mean," Lorraine said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "that you're only here because you have something to sell. Not because you actually want to talk to us, to our audience. We're just a means to an end, aren't we?" "That's not true at all," Rowan replied, maintaining his composure despite the bizarre accusation. "I've always enjoyed speaking with audiences about my work. It's one of the privileges of this job." "Privileges," Lorraine repeated with a laugh. "Must be nice, living such a privileged life." "Tell me, Rowan, when was the last time you did something that actually challenged you? When was the last time you stepped outside your comfortable little bubble?" "Oh, we're just thrilled you could fit us into your very important schedule," Lorraine continued, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I mean, it's not like we're just some little morning show or anything." Mark Hayes glanced sideways at Ross King, both of them sensing the strange energy Lorraine was bringing to the interview. This wasn't the warm, welcoming atmosphere viewers expected. "I'm happy to be here," Rowan replied, maintaining his composure. "I've always enjoyed talking about my work." Mark Hayes decided to intervene, hoping to steer the interview in a more positive direction. "Rowan, I think what our viewers would really love to hear about is your creative process. How do you develop your characters?" "Well," Rowan began, grateful for the redirect, "it usually starts with observation. I watch how people move, how they react to situations, and then I try to find the humor in those moments." "How fascinating," Lorraine interrupted, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "You watch people and then you copy them. Truly groundbreaking stuff." Ross King's mouth fell open slightly. "Lorraine, that's not what he said at all." "Oh, isn't it?" Lorraine leaned forward, her eyes fixed on Rowan with an intensity that felt more like aggression than curiosity. "Let's be honest here. What you do isn't exactly complex, is it? You pull faces, you stumble around, you make silly noises. A child could do it." The atmosphere in the studio shifted dramatically. The warmth drained from the room, replaced by a cold tension that made everyone uncomfortable. Members of the audience exchanged worried glances. "Physical comedy requires years of training and precision," Rowan said, his voice still calm, but with an edge now. "It's actually quite technically demanding." "Oh, please," Lorraine scoffed. "Don't insult my intelligence. I've seen your work. It's not exactly Hamlet, is it? It's not meant to be Hamlet, Rowan replied. It's meant to be comedy. Comedy? Lorraine repeated mockingly. Right, let me ask you something, Rowan. Do you ever look at yourself and think, is this really all I'm capable of? Do you ever wonder if maybe you're wasting your potential on this juvenile nonsense? Mark Hayes put his pen down forcefully. Lorraine, where is this coming from? This is completely inappropriate. I'm asking the questions everyone wants answered, Lorraine said defensively. I'm being real. I'm being honest. Unlike the usual fluff pieces that just blow smoke up every celebrity's backside. There's a difference between asking tough questions and being disrespectful, Ross said firmly. Lorraine turned on him with fire in her eyes. Don't you dare lecture me about respect. I've been doing this job for longer than either of you have been on this panel. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Mark challenged. Because right now, it looks like you're trying to humiliate our guest for no reason. I'm trying to get past the rehearsed answers and the publicist-approved talking points, Lorraine snapped. I'm trying to have a real conversation. This isn't a conversation, Rowan said quietly. This feels like an interrogation. Good, Lorraine said with a satisfied smile. Maybe if you're feeling uncomfortable, you'll actually say something interesting for once. Your work, Lorraine repeated, making air quotes with her fingers. Right, let's talk about that. You've been doing the same character for decades now. Don't you think it's a bit tired? A bit, I don't know, repetitive? Don't you think maybe it's time to admit that you've run out of ideas? The studio fell silent. This wasn't a question. It was an attack designed to wound. Rowan paused, clearly taken aback by the venom in her words. I'm sorry, what exactly are you asking? I'm asking if you've ever considered doing something original, Lorraine said, leaning forward with a condescending smile that didn't reach her eyes. Something that actually requires, real acting skills instead of just pulling faces and falling over. Something with depth? Something with substance? Or is that beyond your capabilities? The audience murmured uncomfortably. Several people looked at each other in confusion, wondering if this was some kind of planned bit that had been poorly executed. But the genuine hurt flashing across Rowan's face made it clear this was no act. Ross King shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Lorraine, I think what Rowan does requires incredible physical talent and timing. The coordination alone is remarkable. Oh, please, Ross, Lorraine snapped, waving her hand dismissively, without even looking at him. Let's not pretend that what he does is Shakespeare. It's slapstick. It's silly. It's for children who don't know any better, and adults who never grew up. Mark Hayes set down his coffee cup with more force than necessary. That's incredibly dismissive of an entire art form, Lorraine, and frankly, it's disrespectful to Rowan and to millions of people who appreciate his work. I'm not being disrespectful, Lorraine insisted, her voice rising slightly. I'm being honest. Something this industry desperately needs more of. Everyone's so busy being polite and politically correct that nobody says what they're really thinking. And what are you really thinking? Rowan asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I'm thinking, Lorraine said, leaning back with crossed arms, that you've made a very comfortable living doing the bare minimum. I'm thinking that you've found a formula that works, and you've been milking it for all it's worth. I'm thinking that calling yourself an actor is a bit generous when what you really are is a prop comedian with good timing. The audience murmured uncomfortably. This wasn't the Lorraine they knew. Or perhaps it was, and the mask was finally slipping. Rowan sat perfectly still, his eyes fixed on Lorraine. When he spoke, his voice was calm but firm, carrying the weight of decades of experience and respect for his craft. Physical comedy is one of the oldest and most respected forms of performance art. Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, Jacques Tati. These were masters of their craft who elevated comedy to an art form. They told stories without words, conveyed emotion through movement, created moments of humanity that transcended language and culture. Yes, and they're all dead, Lorraine shot back with a cruel laugh that echoed through the studio. Maybe that should tell you something about the relevance of what you do. Maybe it's time to accept that physical comedy died with them, and you're just performing at their funeral. Mark Hayes gasped audibly, his hand going to his chest. Lorraine, that's completely out of line. That's beyond unprofessional. That's just cruel. I'll decide what's out of line on my own show. Thank you very much, Lorraine retorted, finally turning to glare at him. This is my name on the door, my face on the promotional materials, my show, and I'll run it however I see fit. Even if that means alienating guests and insulting art forms you clearly don't understand, Mark challenged. I understand perfectly, Lorraine said coldly. I understand that the entertainment industry has evolved, and some people refuse to evolve with it. I understand that what passed for comedy 50 years ago doesn't cut it anymore. I understand that audiences today want more than just watching grown men trip over their own feet. Ross King leaned forward, his voice intense. Rowan's work has brought joy to millions of people around the world, children and adults alike. His characters are beloved across generations. That's not nothing, Lorraine. That's actually quite remarkable. Beloved, Lorraine said with air quotes again. Such a convenient word. So vague. So impossible to quantify. You know what else is beloved? Participation trophies. That doesn't make them meaningful. I'll decide what's out of line on my own show, thank you very much, Lorraine retorted, not even looking at him. Her eyes remained locked on Rowan, like a predator sizing up prey. Rowan took a slow breath, his hands clasped together on his lap. I came here today to talk about my new project, to share something I'm passionate about with your viewers. I didn't come here to be insulted or to defend my life's work against someone who seems determined to tear it down for reasons I don't understand. Insulted? Lorraine laughed again, louder this time, the sound harsh and grating. Oh, you think that's an insult? Let me tell you what's insulting, Rowan. What's insulting is watching someone coast on the same tired gimmick for 40 years and act like they're some kind of genius. What's insulting is performers who think they're above criticism just because they have a fan base of people with low standards. Low standards? Rowan's eyebrows raised. You're saying that people who enjoy comedy have low standards? I'm saying that people who think watching you stumble around is the height of entertainment probably aren't the sharpest tools in the shed, Lorraine said with a smug expression. I'm saying that maybe, just maybe, there's a reason why your kind of comedy appeals to the lowest common denominator. The audience was beginning to shift from uncomfortable to angry. A woman in the third row stood up. This is horrible, she said loudly. I came here to see Rowan Atkinson, not to watch you bully him. Sit down, Lorraine ordered, pointing at her. You're audience members, not participants. We're people, another audience member called out. And we don't appreciate watching you treat a guest like this. Lorraine's face flushed red. Security, if anyone else interrupts, please escort them out. Ross King stood up from his seat, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. Lorraine, stop. This is wrong. This is so far beyond wrong, I don't even have words for it. Rowan is our guest. He came here in good faith. Sit down, Ross, Lorraine commanded, her voice sharp as a knife. I'm conducting this interview. This isn't an interview, Rowan said quietly, but his words cut through the chaos like a bell. This is an ambush. This is you using your platform to attack someone for your own entertainment. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Lorraine said, rolling her eyes theatrically. Though I suppose drama is all you have, isn't it? Since you certainly don't have range. Tell me, Rowan, have you ever played a character that doesn't involve you being completely incompetent? Or is that just typecasting? Are you actually that useless in real life too? The cruelty in her words hung in the air like poison. The studio audience had gone completely silent, except for a few people who were quietly gathering their things, preparing to leave in protest. Some people looked away, embarrassed to witness what was happening. Others stared in shock, unable to process how quickly a morning talk show had devolved into something so ugly. Mark Hayes leaned toward Lorraine, his voice low and urgent. This needs to stop right now. You're humiliating yourself and the show. You're destroying everything we've built here." "I'm humiliating myself?" Lorraine turned on him with fury burning in her eyes. "I'm the only one here with the guts to say what everyone's thinking. That this man sitting across from me is a one-trick pony who's been riding the same horse for his entire career. That he's overrated, overpaid, and overexposed." "Nobody is thinking that," Mark said firmly. "The only person thinking that is you, and you're projecting your own insecurities onto someone who's accomplished more in his career than most people dream of." "Insecurities?" Lorraine's voice reached a new pitch. "How dare you? I have no insecurities. I am at the top of my profession. I have worked incredibly hard to get where I am." "So has Rowan," Ross interjected. "So has every performer who makes it look easy. That's the whole point of mastery. It's supposed to look effortless, but it takes years of work, years of practice, years of dedication." "Please," Lorraine scoffed, "don't lecture me about hard work. I'm up at 4 in the morning every day. I'm here preparing while the rest of you are still sleeping. I've sacrificed everything for this show." "And that gives you the right to tear other people down?" Rowan asked, his voice still controlled, but with an edge of steel. "Your sacrifices, your hard work, somehow justify cruelty?" "It's not cruelty," Lorraine insisted, but her voice wavered slightly. "It's honesty. It's real talk. It's what this industry needs, instead of everyone patting each other on the back and pretending everything is wonderful." "There's a difference between honesty and malice," Rowan said. "You've crossed that line repeatedly in the last few minutes." "Oh, I've crossed a line?" Lorraine stood up now, her hands pressed flat on her desk. "You want to talk about crossing lines? How about the line between comedy and torture? Because that's what watching your performances feels like sometimes." "Torture." Rowan's jaw tightened. For the first time, real anger flickered across his face, replacing the patient dignity he'd maintained throughout the assault. "You know nothing about my career. You know nothing about the years of training at drama school, the physical discipline required to make comedy look natural, the countless hours of rehearsal that go into every single performance. You know nothing about the bruises, the injuries, the physical toll. You sit behind a desk and talk, and you think that gives you insight into what real performance requires." "Oh, here we go," Lorraine said, spinning her finger in the air mockingly. "The whole 'you don't understand my art' speech, the tortured artist routine. Give me a break. You're not an artist, Rowan. You're a clown, and not even a particularly good one. You're a relic from a bygone era who refuses to acknowledge that the world has moved on without you." "That's enough," Ross King shouted, slamming both hands on the desk so hard that Lorraine's coffee cup rattled. "Lorraine, you need to apologize right now. Not just to Rowan, but to everyone watching this disaster." "I will do no such thing," Lorraine said, her chin raised defiantly. "This is my show. These are my questions. And if he can't handle a little honesty, a little real journalism, maybe he should stick to children's programming, where nobody expects anything from him, where nobody asks hard questions, where everyone just laughs at the funny man doing funny things." "Real journalism?" Mark Hayes stood up as well, his voice shaking with anger. "Is that what you think this is? You're not asking hard questions, Lorraine. You're not conducting an interview. You're bullying someone on live television because it makes you feel powerful." "I am powerful," Lorraine snapped back. "I have the platform. I have the microphone. I have the audience. And I'll use them however I choose." "That's not power," Rowan said, and something in his tone made everyone stop and look at him. "That's privilege, and you're abusing it." He stood up slowly. The movement was deliberate, controlled, powerful. Every eye in the studio fixed on him as he rose to his full height and looked down at Lorraine with an expression of profound disappointment mixed with pity. I've worked with some of the most talented people in this industry, he said, his voice low and measured, every word carefully chosen. Directors who could draw out performances I didn't know I was capable of. Writers who could craft jokes that worked on multiple levels. Actors who elevated every scene they were in. Crew members who worked 16-hour days to make sure every detail was perfect. People who understood that creativity comes in many forms, that there's no hierarchy of art, only different expressions of the human experience. People who respect the craft, regardless of the genre or the medium. You clearly are not one of those people. Oh, sit down, Lorraine said, but there was less confidence in her voice now. She flicked her wrist dismissively, but the gesture looked weak, desperate. You're not going anywhere. We have 12 more minutes to fill. We have commercial breaks to get through. You have a contract. No, Rowan said simply. I don't think we do. He reached up and unclipped the small microphone from his lapel. The gesture was smooth, practiced, final. What are you doing? Lorraine's confident facade cracked slightly. You can't just leave in the middle of an interview. Watch me, Rowan replied. Mark Hayes started clapping. Then Ross King joined in. Within seconds, the entire studio audience was on their feet, applauding Rowan as he prepared to walk off the set. Lorraine's face turned red. Sit down, she shouted at the audience. Stop that! Stop clapping! But they didn't stop. The applause grew louder, more enthusiastic. It was clear whose side they were on. You can't treat me like this, Lorraine said, her voice shaking now. I am the host of this show. I have the power here. Rowan placed the microphone gently on the desk. Power isn't something you have, Lorraine. It's something you earn through respect and decency. You've demonstrated neither today. If you walk off this set, you'll never work on British television again, Lorraine threatened, and pointing her finger at him. I have connections. I have influence. Then use them, Rowan said calmly. But I suspect you'll find that cruelty and threats aren't the currency you think they are. Ross King moved toward Rowan. I'm coming with you, he announced. I won't be part of this anymore. Ross, you're fired, Lorraine screamed. You hear me? You're fired. You can't fire me, Ross said, shaking his head. I quit, effective immediately. Mark Hayes stood as well. And I'm done too. This has been building for months, Lorraine. Your ego, your tantrums, the way you treat people when the cameras aren't rolling. Today, you just showed everyone who you really are. You're all a bunch of ungrateful traitors, Lorraine shouted, her voice cracking. I made this show. I made all of you. You made yourself, Rowan said quietly. And now, you'll have to live with what you've created. The three men walked toward the exit together. The audience continued clapping, many of them standing, some wiping away tears. This wasn't just about Rowan anymore. This was about every guest who'd been made to feel small, every person who'd been talked down to, every moment of kindness that had been replaced with cruelty. Get back here, Lorraine screamed. This is my show. Mine. You don't get to walk away from me. But they were already gone. The studio door closing behind them with a soft click that somehow felt louder than all of Lorraine's screaming. Lorraine stood alone at her desk, chest heaving, makeup running slightly from the heat of the studio lights and her own rage. The audience slowly stopped clapping and began filing out, shaking their heads, whispering to each other about what they'd just witnessed. Where are you going? Lorraine called after them. We still have a show to do. Sit down. The show isn't over. But it was over. The cameras were still rolling, capturing every moment of her meltdown, every second of her desperate attempts to maintain control that had already slipped through her fingers. One of the producers rushed onto the set. Lorraine, we need to cut to commercial. No! Lorraine shouted. We're going to continue. Bring out the next guest. There is no next guest, the producer said gently. Rowan was the only one booked for this segment. Then bring out someone else. Anyone. Call someone. Lorraine, please. Let's just go to break and regroup. I don't need to regroup, Lorraine insisted, her voice becoming more frantic. I'm fine. Everything's fine. This is all just a misunderstanding. Rowan Atkinson is too sensitive. That's all. He couldn't handle a real conversation. He's used to people fawning over him. Treating him like some kind of comedy god, when really he's just a middle-aged man making silly faces. The producer looked at her with a mixture of pity and concern. We're going to commercial now. The red lights on the cameras blinked off. The studio fell into an eerie quiet. Lorraine stood there, alone on her own set, surrounded by empty chairs and the remnants of what was supposed to be a simple, pleasant interview. She had come into this morning believing she was untouchable, that her position gave her the right to say whatever she wanted, to whomever she wanted. She had thought that tearing down Rowan Atkinson would somehow elevate her, make her seem edgy and unafraid. Instead, she had revealed exactly who she was. And now, everyone knew. Backstage, Rowan sat in the green room with Ross and Mark. None of them spoke for a long moment. The adrenaline was still pumping, the shock of what had just happened still settling in. I've never seen her like that, Ross finally said. I mean, I've seen her be difficult, but never that openly hostile. She's been getting worse, Mark added. More demanding, more dismissive of the crew, more convinced of her own importance. Rowan shook his head slowly. I genuinely came here in good faith. I was looking forward to this interview. We know, Ross said. Everyone knows. What happened in there? That's all on her. A young production assistant knocked on the door frame. Mr. Atkinson, your car is ready whenever you'd like to leave. Thank you, Rowan said, standing up. He looked at Ross and Mark. What will you two do? Ross smiled. I've been thinking about making some changes anyway. Maybe this is the push I needed. Same here, Mark agreed. Life's too short to work in a toxic environment. They walked together toward the exit, passing crew members who stopped to shake Rowan's hand, to thank him for standing up to Lorraine, to apologize for what he'd endured. Back in the studio, Lorraine sat in her makeup chair, staring at her reflection. Her makeup artist approached cautiously. Can I touch up your... she started. Leave me alone, Lorraine said coldly. The makeup artist retreated quickly. Lorraine continued staring at herself in the mirror, seeing perhaps for the first time the person she had become. The entitled host who believed her own press, who thought her platform gave her permission to be cruel, who had confused confidence with arrogance. The executive producer entered the room. Lorraine, we need to talk about what just happened. I don't want to talk about it, Lorraine said, not looking away from her reflection. Well, we have to. 3 people just walked off your show on live television. Social media is exploding. We're getting calls from advertisers, from the network, from everyone. It was just a disagreement, Lorraine said weakly. People are overreacting. You called one of the most beloved performers in Britain a clown. You mocked his life's work. You screamed at your own panelists. That's not a disagreement, Lorraine. That's a disaster. Lorraine's hands began to tremble. The reality of what she'd done was starting to sink in, pushing past the anger and defensiveness. I was just trying to ask tough questions, she said, but even she didn't believe it anymore. Tough questions are one thing, the executive producer said. Personal attacks are something else entirely. Meanwhile, Rowan was in his car, driving away from the studio. His phone was buzzing constantly with messages of support from colleagues, friends, and fans who had already seen clips of the interview circulating online. He didn't feel triumphant. He didn't feel vindicated. He felt sad. And sad that someone had been so consumed by their own ego that they'd lost sight of basic human decency. Sad that what should have been a pleasant conversation about creativity and passion had turned into a public spectacle. But he also felt relieved. Relieved that he had stood up for himself. relieved that he had walked away rather than engaging in a shouting match, relieved that he had maintained his dignity even when someone was actively trying to strip it away. Back at the studio, the crew was packing up equipment. The audience had long since dispersed, talking excitedly about what they'd witnessed, already forming the story they would tell their friends and family. Lorraine remained in her chair, the studio growing darker as lights were switched off one by one. She had built her career on being warm and approachable, on making guests feel comfortable and welcomed. Somewhere along the way, she had forgotten that. Somewhere along the way, she had started to believe that her job was to be provocative rather than kind, to create conflict rather than conversation. And now she sat alone in the growing darkness, the cost of that transformation becoming painfully clear. The interview that was supposed to last 20 minutes had ended in less than 10. The relationship between host and guest, which should have been collaborative and respectful, had devolved into something ugly and uncomfortable. And the person who had walked away with their head held high, with the support of the audience and the respect of their peers, was not the powerful host behind the desk. It was the guest who had simply refused to accept being treated poorly. In just 34 seconds, from the moment Rowan placed his microphone on the desk to the moment he walked out the studio door, everything had changed. Lorraine's carefully constructed image had shattered. Her authority had evaporated. Her power had proven to be nothing more than an illusion that only worked when people agreed to pretend it was real. And Rowan Atkinson, the man she had tried to diminish and mock, had shown everyone watching exactly what real strength looked like. Not shouting, not threats, not cruelty. Just quiet dignity, clear boundaries, and the courage to walk away from toxicity, regardless of who was creating it or what platform they stood on. The studio was empty now. The cameras were off. The lights were dark. But the impact of what had happened would echo far beyond those walls. A reminder that respect is not something you demand. It is something you earn, and that true class reveals itself not in how you treat those above you, but in how you treat everyone who crosses your path.